My name is Roger Nokes. I'm the editor-in-chief here at Rock and a Hard Place Press. Thanks for joining us. We have a special panel discussion entitled The Past, Regret, and Redemption in Noir. Co-hosting with me is wonderful editor at RHP, Rob Smith. Thanks for joining, Rob, and for your help and for everyone's help. So tonight's topic is central to what I think Rock and a Hard Place is about. We look at stories of characters that are faced with difficult choices, difficult circumstances, maybe bad decisions they've made in the past, and then what they do next. Another way of looking at that is saying these characters are in rough spots. They did things, and now they have to decide what they're going to do with all this stuff. So maybe they're looking for redemption. Maybe they regret everything. How do they take the weight of the past and do something with it, even if they have few options? So looking at these questions is something that I think is relatively unique to noir, maybe at least to the depth that noir does it, or the style in which it does it. Noir does it, where often we see characters like Jake Gittes in Chinatown who act in certain ways because something dark is in their past. Some characters like Jake try to avoid similar situations. Some characters try to make up for what they've done. In noir, it seems they often fail. Tonight, we're speaking with three excellent writers the Rock and a Hard Place has had the privilege of publishing. We're going to get their thoughts on the topic, hear about their stories and how they've used the past in them, and talk about some other stories and books where the past, regret, and redemption feature prominently. Rob, would you like to take it from there?
Thank you. I'm going to introduce our guests tonight. We have Nick Kolokowski. He's been obsessed with mystery and thriller fiction since his dad gave him the copy of Trouble Is My Business when he was 10. Recent books include Absolute Unit from Crystal Lake Publishing, Payback is Forever from Shotgun Honey. His short stories and nonfiction essays have appeared in various anthologies and magazines, including Crime Reads, Noir City, the magazine of the Film Noir Foundation, Lit Reactor, Shotgun Honey, Mystery Tribune, Rock and a Hard Place, and many more. Very welcome to have him tonight. And we also have Chris Harding Thornton, a seventh generation Nebraskan. She's the author of Pickard County Atlas and the now USA Today bestseller Little Underworld. Just came out today. In addition to holding an MFA and a PhD, Harding Thornton has worked as an overseer of quality assurance at a condom company, a jar lid screwer at a plastics plant, a closer at Burger King, a clerk at a record store, a manager at an all-age club, a PA writer, and a teacher of writing and literature. Our next guest is Mike McHone. Work has appeared in Ellery Queen's Magazine, Alfred Hitchcock's Mystery Magazine, Rock and a Hard Place, Guilty, Mystery Tribune, Mystery Magazine, Dark Yonder, Tough, Shotgun Honey, the Anthony Award-nominated anthology Under the Thumb, Stories of Police Oppression, edited by Sean Cosby, or S.A. Cosby, and elsewhere. He was a recipient of the Mystery Writers of America's Hugh Holton Award in 2020, while his short story, A Drive-By on Chalmers Road, placed on the Ellery Queen's Readers List the same year. A former journalist and freelance writer, his articles, op-eds, humor pieces have appeared in such outlets as the Detroit News, the AV Club, Playboy, Hustler, among other publications, while his poetry has been published in Punk Noir, Gorko Gazette, and Nine Cloud Journal. He currently lives in Detroit, and you can find him on online at MikeHone.com. And once again, congratulations to Chris for the USA Today bestseller list today.
Thanks. Yeah, that's wild. It's wild.
Yeah, I'm so thrilled that on your book launch day you've joined us.
Well, the book's launched before this, but it's just now the bestseller.
Last week, but yeah, I didn't hear about the bestseller thing until today, and I woke up to a text and I was like, what? Like, and I thought that can't be right. So there's some kind of glitch. Fine. I'll take it for today.
Well, I guess we can go into the questions we're going to start asking. And can you all take time between each one of you? Can you discuss the role that the past plays in your own fiction?
So yeah, we can start with Chris. Since you the New York Times bestseller, would you like to start?
USA Today.
USA Today.
USA Today. Sorry, I'm working on the technical stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple ways that I look at it. One is that I always think characters need to be acting organically. And I think that whenever we act as people organically, I think it's out of this stew of like, chemistry and then every experience we've ever had in the order that we've had it up until that moment. And then we think we're deciding to do something, but really we're just acting organically to whoever we are in that moment. And I think that the past is very much who we are right now. So I think that there's like no other alternative. You have to be acting. I mean, I also can't conceive of that ob ovo thing. Like, I can't imagine what there is before a beginning. Everything's in media res to me. So there's that. And I think I've set books in the past because I think I have a really weird, skewed view of time. I was born with like 11 grandparents, and the oldest one was born in 1883. So like it's weird to think that like she was married and had kids by the time there was a radio station, stuff like that just as wild to me.
That's
Mike,
amazing.
yeah. Mike, do you have thoughts on yours?
Well, it's a good question. I wish I had a good answer. Um, you know, I guess many of the stories that I've written, the past kind of bubbles up, here and there with the characters. Unless you're writing a time travel story, I guess it doesn't really, address them fully. But it's just little nuances here and there that you don't necessarily have to go into a deep dive into how, held back they are by their past or whatever. Sometimes, and this is just in some of the, the noir films or some of the Western films that I enjoy, Fistful of Dollars, for example, or, a lot of the Eastwood and spaghetti Westerns that I like. You don't really get a sense of this person's past, on the nose pretty much, but you can tell just by their actions how capable they are at, well, number one, killing people. They've done something in their past that, has obviously shaped them into who they are. And you can also see a lot of that same kind of approach to character development and like Jim Thompson's books. You're not exactly fully, exposed to the main character in say Population 1280. You're not really fully exactly where he comes from, but this guy's fucked up. And and so sometimes I think taking that approach where you don't expose their history makes them a more interesting character. I haven't done that a lot in my stuff, because I only write noir maybe about a third of the time, whereas another third of the time I write police procedurals. So the noir aspect doesn't necessarily play into that, but again, like I said, wish I had a good answer for you, but this is I'm doing the best I can right now. So.
Pretty good.
As are we all. I think it was a good answer.
Oh, thank you.
Nick, how do you feel about the past playing a part in yours? I mean, I know you had the your one novel, Payback is Forever, is kind of a that Miller is the is he kind of like your Parker? Is that?
He is kind of like Parker. I think, I mean, in noir, the past sort of operates like quicksand, and you have these characters who necessarily come. It doesn't even necessarily have to be the main character themselves. I mean, for example, Parker is a character who like infamously comes without a past whatsoever, and Westlake very deliberately made sure that Parker's like sort of the ultimate cipher where there's no past. But when you read those books, he always gets screwed over because some other character is the one with the past. And in that past, that character did something bad that led to a debt that makes them double cross everybody or something bad. And suddenly Parker, the man with no attachments at all, suddenly is the victim of someone else's attachments and errors and so on. So yeah, in general, like noir, the past is quicksand, characters struggle to escape. And I think kind of the fun part of a lot of books and movies is how characters almost realize that, you know, their past has dictated their current behavior and they're being doomed by it, even when they realize that this shouldn't be happening, that they should sort of be transcending their nature, but they can't help themselves. It's sort of like at the end of Heat. And it's one of my favorite camera shots in like all of cinema is when De Niro and Amy, I forget the name of the actress, they're driving through a tunnel and De Niro thinks that like he's finally gotten clear that Pacino is not going to nail him. There's this amazing shot where they're driving through the tunnel at night, so like the car is suddenly blooming with light. You think like this is it, this is like kind of the happy ending. And then you see his face working because like these principles that he has that have been dictated by his past suddenly seize control of him, and like suddenly he's veering the car off the road because like he has to kind of follow this programming that was set for him before, and obviously that inevitably leads to his doom. So I think, I mean, Noir is definitely past infused. Payback is forever. Yeah, I mean, the Miller is sort of a, I'm not going to say a Parker clone because I was very deliberately trying to subvert a lot of the Parker cliches, but he really doesn't sort of come with a lot of baggage in that sense. Another book I wrote, Love and Bullets, there's one of the main characters is this assassin who is going completely nuts, for want of a better term. And like throughout that book, like everything that happened in his past, like his divorce and like all the bad stuff that he did before, like leads him to constantly do really impulsive stuff that sort of, I mine it for comedy, but then it also kind of like wrecks the situation and sets everything backwards. So yeah, I mean, it's a useful tool, but I really like watching characters get sucked. Maybe it's sadistic, but I really like watching characters in noir get sucked down by whatever they've done in the past, despite what they're trying to do now.
Great. So something that Mike said in his very good answer led me to think, they're not everything is on the surface. You're not seeing everything. You know something's there in these old Westerns. So thinking about kind of the iceberg way of describing things, like there's so much beneath the surface, but the reader is only seeing what's on the tip. But the writer knows what's underneath, right? So can you guys talk about kind of maybe some of the characters? How did you go about creating their past, and was it your intention to think like that these are people that are weighed down by the past? We can start in a different circle. Mike, would you like to go with that?
Well, it's a good question again. The one story that I always come back to is, I think, if I'm not mistaken, the first story that Rock and Hard Place published of mine was Keeping Time. And for those who may not have read it, shame on you.
Indeed.
It's basically about a guy who his wife is killed in a holdup, basically the holdup gone wrong. And it was a young man that killed him. It was sort of a gang initiation. The kid's in this prison. And the young guy reaches out to this widower and writes him a letter, says, I apologize, I didn't mean to do that. The gun went off, all that kind of stuff. And when I started formulating this story, it was just like, well, if I were in that situation, what would I do? And it's kind of coupled with this true crime documentary I watched a couple years ago of these parents of this young girl that were killed by her fiance or something. And they joined they'd forgiven her, they gotten past it. And there was this clip of them singing gospel songs. They were playing guitars in a prison. And I just thought it was so surreal. And I'm like, if I were in that situation, because I play guitar, I would take the screw at the back of the guitar, sharpen it to a shank, and kill the motherfucker. So that's kind of like how I approach that story. It's like, so how would you do that in this situation? And so again, it's like a history where it's not overt in this character, but you get this sense that, number one, he can't get past his wife's death to the point where he's legitimately going to go into a prison systematically over a course of a year or however long, or whatever the time like the story is, and he's going to earn this kid's trust just to go in there and kill him. And of course, if you read the story, I'm not going to give the ending away, but it doesn't go as planned, basically. But again, there's little hints in this particular story where, you know, his cousin went to Vietnam and his cousin was stepped on a landmine or something like that, just destroyed his cousin. And that's another hint where he can't get past it. And he just, you know, there's things where he just is bogged down by this. And it's just, you know, you're pretty much soaked in darkness at that point. And again, this is just one example of, you know, some of the characters that I've created. But, and as I said before, it's like, I think that it makes it more interesting where you just sort of met out the history. You don't necessarily, you know, have to write like a character Bible. You know, to some writers, it does help to do that. But for me, for that, again, that particular story, I thought it was a bit more interesting to just sort of take a normal guy's reaction and push that normal guy to an extreme. So.
Cool. Nick, we'll put you in the middle again.
Okay.
What do you think?
So, I mean, I've done it a number of different ways. In Boise Long Pig Hunting Club, and then its sequel, Rattlesnake Rodeo, the main character whose name is Jack Halligan. My roommate in college was subsequently went into the military and went special forces. And so a lot of Jake Halligan's past is just my buddy's like past, like basically ripped out wholesale and bolted into the character's background, and then also one of my brothers-in-law, some of his experience also in Iraq and Afghanistan and so on was also kind of merged with that. And then I had a sister-in-law who was a bounty hunter, and some of her experiences sort of ripped out wholesale and plopped into the character of Jake Halligan's sister, Frankie. So none of them have read those two books, and I know that the day that one of them picks it up, I'm probably going to get a relatively irate phone call, but I'm sort of, that bill has not been paid yet. Other times it's just sort of a mishmash of it's core like the approach to character can sometimes be like building a coral reef where these things sort of kind of accrete, and then you sort of realize that you have a character that's built off all these little bits of past. The manuscript I just finished, the main character is very much that. It's a little bit pulled from real life Hollywood fixers. It's a little bit pulled from like actual black bag PR people I knew when I was an entertainment writer and going out to LA. It's a little bit of sort of like the Jake Gittes mold of like fictional detective and like kind of stuff, the fictional past pulled from fictional characters and so on. So I mean, and I think both approaches fundamentally work. I mean, I think there's one thing to basically lightly fictionalize a real person, and there's another thing to be said for, just kind of creating a character from whole cloth off these little bits. And as long as it sort of merges well with the larger fabric of the story, I mean, it's fine. So.
Okay. Coral Reef. Okay, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, God, I feel like I'm not as deliberate as I should be about this stuff, but like Pickard County Atlas, that started with like Pam's voice, and I just heard the voice and just wrote it down, and that was, she kind of came with a whole large set of baggage. And Harley was, again, I guess all three of the main characters came really easily, and I understood where they were coming from. Like I just knew I don't know, I just like knew their past. That sounds so flaky to say, but and then the last Little Underworld, I was working off of just a rotten limb of family tree anyway. Like that was just like, I mean, Jim Bealey is basically my great grandpa's uncle, and he was a private investigator, and he did have a lot of baggage, and I mean, I fictionalized a lot of it, but obviously, like I'm trying to understand that person back in the day, and the only way I can do it is to kind of, I guess I probably put a lot of my own past into these characters. I think, especially with Pickard, a lot of that, I hope my mom never hears this, but like, a lot of it is just like, I just lifted little personal things and kind of worked through them by writing the book, I guess. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, I hope your mother isn't on Facebook. Maybe she wasn't watching YouTube, but now that we've had to post it on Facebook, she might be watching.
She's not on Facebook. She's not.
I thought everyone's mother was on Facebook.
I think, I mean, Chris makes that point though, the family tree just lends itself to all that history that we all have, you know, from our family trees to just explore and find and mine for fiction that you have. Yeah, I like the family tree stuff. Um, this is another question. Are there works by other writers that you enjoy where the past, regret, and redemption play a large role? Any writers that you find like that? We'll go with Mike this time.
Um, Honestly, I'm still kind of catching up on my noir reading. Because to be bluntly honest with you, I've only been reading mystery and crime fiction for about 5 years now. Because most of my life I was reading, Harlan Ellison and Ray Bradbury and guys like that. But speaking of Bradbury, I mean, past regret and redemption kind of factors into Fahrenheit 451,
Oh, yeah.
technically with Guy Montag. Because at the end he realized, well, not at the end, but like about a third of the way through the book, he kind of realizes that it's not a pleasure to burn. And firemen had a vastly different, connotation prior to the start of the story. So that would be one. Siddhartha, classic.
Yeah.
Bright Lights, Big City would be another one.
Right.
And one that I read, I just discovered this writer a couple months ago, Medicine Walk by Richard. I'm not sure how to pronounce the last name, Wagamisi or Wagamise. He was a Canadian writer. And I don't really want to say anything about it. It's basically, it fits that exact parameter that we laid out for this discussion, past regret and redemption. That's exactly what it is. Basically, to put it on a bumper sticker for you, as Kinky Friedman would say, it's basically about a guy dying that wants to reconnect with his son. And it's probably one of the best books I ever read. So, yeah, check it out.
Kinky Friedman's a cool guy.
What's that?
Kinky Friedman's a cool guy.
Yeah, I love that man. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we could talk movies, we could talk outside noir too. So, I mean, just kind of the topic. A lot of the thoughts that I had on this were kind of failed attempts at redemption. And what comes to me a lot thinking about failed attempts at redemption is The Wrestler, the film with Mickey
Yeah.
Rourke, which I think is a big, guy tries, is obviously flawed, tries to redeem himself, doesn't work out because of his own mistakes, and then just kind of like, well, fuck it. And I tend to dwell on those types of movies. That's what, like when I
Yeah.
think of redemption, it's like, oh, The Wrestler, even though it's obviously very failed. But yeah, film too. What do you guys think?
The yeah, film I feel like every single, I mean, Scarface, I mean, off the top of my head, it's on like there's so many character. I mean, has, the Wild Bunch. I mean, that sort of elegiac, heroic death that, characters try to succeed in some way. I mean, Peckinpah made an entire career out of it and ended up getting shot in the back in the last 30 seconds of the last reel, after trying and failing to, like, kind of redeem their miserable nature. Book-wise, actually, I just finished rereading The Last King of California by Jordan Harper, which criminally, this is like absolutely criminal. The book never came out in the US. It only came out in the UK. But that's a book where
100%.
the character's past is not only present, but so paralyzing in a lot of ways that, like, I mean, it's sort of almost like a cancer and that there's not really there's kind of a redemption via annihilation in the end, but I mean, I wouldn't describe the ending of that book as redemptive so much as just like the slate's been burned like completely clean at the end. And then there's this beautiful last page about, kind of how whales were, came back on the land and went back into the water, and they knew something that we didn't about kind of like the nature of life or something like that. But anyway, I mean, so that's one in terms of the literature. Recently that's sort of been top of mind in terms of like kind of miserable failures to reconcile or absorb the past.
Yeah,
It's a great book.
I think that I get really stuck on books and movies where maybe there's redemption, like, but it's in the eye of the beholder. It's not really, usually somebody's trying to redeem themselves, but whether or not they do that is really, I don't know. I mean, like Camus the stranger, like does that guy get redeemed? Like because he all of a sudden like realizes, oh, I'm, like I'm alive and now I'm gonna die. In a way, I guess, but not really. It doesn't take away or like Vonnegut, like he can't unbomb Dresden, like so there's I think I probably really I'm drawn to work that if there is redemption, it's in a really twisted sort of way, I think.
I'd like to
So-
add to Unforgiven.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of what you were saying. Like, they try to be redemptive and they fail miserably, which I mean that's exactly what that movie is. I mean that's just he just accepts who he is. He's a murderer and he's gonna kill everybody and move on.
When Roger said it, I thought of the Drop, by Dennis Lehane, the book or the short story that got me in the movie with um, Gandolfini
Gandolfini.
and yeah, and that just Bob, at the end.
Or Angel Heart. I mean,
Yeah.
the whole
Mm,
thing
yeah.
where, I mean, the beauty of Angel Heart is that last couple of minutes when there's, I mean, some people see that flip as cheesy, but I think it's sort of brilliant in a very pulpy way. But at the end of it, it's like, he tried, the Johnny Fortune tried his best to escape, the deal with the devil, and but the devil always wins. I think that's like a really amazing example of that.
Oh, that moment when Mickey Rourke cries,
Mhm.
like, oh my God, like
Yeah.
that's one of the most visceral things I've ever seen.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm going to burn in hell. Yeah. And he said, yeah, that's amazing.
So do you think that the past plays a larger role in noir than in other genres? And if not, is there something about noir that treats the past differently?
I think that fundamentally the noir tends to treat the past as lethal. I mean, it's radioactive. It's if like I was saying before, if not for the main character, then certainly there's some other character whose past is going to come into play in like a huge way. I mean, the other day, I was seeing if I could pump some life into a half-completed manuscript that's set in the 1950s. So I pulled out a copy of Double Indemnity, which actually is set slightly before that. But I mean, Neff, the character of Neff, the main character in that is not Parker-esque, but certainly he doesn't really have that much of a past. But I mean, when he's dealing with the femme fatale, I mean, her past and everything, and it just gets like progressively weirder and weirder. It turns out like who she really is underneath. But yeah, I think noir plays with the idea of past as this toxic thing more than other genres do necessarily. It's hard to find. I mean, the idea of a bad past for a character, I think, is sort of like a pivotal engine for a lot of narratives.
Yeah, and I mean, I think when you consider what noir is, I mean, it's that darkness, right? It's that moral ambiguity. It's like, where does that come from? That's not just that it has to have a source, right? It's gotta, and I think that source is inevitably in the character's past, probably.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, like what Chris said, I mean, the trajectory is always, you don't start out great and end up bad. You just start out bad and end up worse. It's pretty much, classic noir.
Well, do you feel like these noir characters have an abundance of regret, like an overabundance, maybe more than other characters?
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, and like I was saying earlier, in some cases, as Nick was talking about Double Indemnity, you can reveal the past. It's like the onion layer, peeling it back and things like that, or not mention it at all. And again, it's kind of you take it at face value that these people, again, they come from a dark place, and you just when you jump into a story like again, Double Indemnity or Diabolique or Gun Crazy or whatever it is, uh, After Dark, My Sweet, whatever. Again, anything by Jim Thompson.
Yeah.
You're just going to understand that there are people in here that just know how to kill people, and we're not going to deliberately tell you how it is, but it's probably going to be bad. And So yeah, they're going to kill somebody at the drop of a hat or steal something. You may not get a full sense of their backgrounds or their histories, but and again, sometimes that really, really helps a character. For instance, Anton Chigurh, No Country for Old Men. Where the fuck did that guy come from? Hell, probably, you know, but who knows? And it's probably best that we don't know. And, you know, for people that know me, I'm a comic book dork, and we don't necessarily know the Joker's origin, the true Joker. You know, I mean, there's been variations here and there. But that's one of the appealing characters. And I think it's no mistake that people keep getting drawn to that character 80 plus years on. You know, it's like we don't really know where this guy comes from. And with the exception of the Joaquin Phoenix movie, usually any attempt to kind of explain his past is, doesn't really live up to keeping it guarded or shielded or whatever. So,
Doesn't the Nicholson variant have an origin story? Yeah, because Batman dumps him in the vat. Yeah,
yeah.
that's right. Dim memories of my childhood trying to like, pull those out from the
Yeah, but
past.
I think Mike is right in that those origin stories for the Joker, for whatever reason, don't stick in anyone's memory.
Right. Yeah. Because it's just, you know, the chaos aspect. Playing against, you know, you have the chaos aspect, playing against a guy who's very methodical, and, you know, he thinks 20 steps ahead. He plans everything out. He's got a contingency for everything. And then you got this weirdo that's just going to set fire to a pile of money. And just because it's funny that you can't.
Batman also has the whole past behind him, which is very clear. So,
Oh,
you
absolutely.
know, that's an interesting,
Yeah. I mean, there's
comparison.
no, I don't think it's coincidence that they started out in detective comics. And that was basically equatable with pulp reading back then in the late 30s. And, you know, a lot of people tend to forget that Batman he's only second to Sherlock Holmes in terms of his detective abilities. And he plays with a lot of, you know, noir tropes, and, you know, it's good stuff.
So I appreciate that the
90
last
years
Batman
on,
movie.
people should read Batman.
Yeah.
Right, but it's not a rock and a hard place story because he's wealthy, so don't submit it.
That's true. Yeah.
He's the
Okay.
1%.
Well, that
Right.
shoots my next story in the ass. So I guess
Yeah,
I
well,
won't
we're
submit
telling
to
you
any of
beforehand, before you submit.
Billionaire going around beating down people with his fists by night. Yeah.
No.
I was just thinking about that, like maybe I don't know. I guess maybe what I think about is like stuff that gets labeled as literature at a point in history. The big separation between like literature, like heavy literature, and noir is solely class. I mean,
Right.
at a point, I think, you know.
I mean, No Country for Old Men, I think, is a perfect example. I mean, that's an extraordinarily pulpy book. I mean, it would be right there on the shelf along with Jim Thompson's, you know, Killer Inside Me or whatever, you know, the stripped down prose style and whatnot. But, you know, obviously because it's McCarthy, it's treated as high literature. And I mean, it operates perfectly well as both. I mean, I think that you know, John Steinbeck wrote a werewolf novel that his estate is 110% dedicated to making sure never, ever, ever sees the light of day, which is also the perfect idea for a heist. But I
There
mean,
you go.
but let's say
We're
some
live,
enterprising,
Nick. You have influenced someone.
let's say like some enterprising soul were to break into, you know, the Steinbeck library at whatever university and steal the werewolf manuscript and publish it. Is that literature or is that pulp? You know, because I mean, it's got werewolves, it's got all these pulp elements to it. I'm sure. I mean, Steinbeck was yeah. I mean, it just I think the line does get really blurry.
Yeah, and that's across, you know, most genres. I mean, like 1984. I mean, it's a social science fiction novel. We're going to call it literature, but no, it's a social science fiction novel. Vonnegut is in the literature section. He's not necessarily in the science fiction section. You know, it's like, and you guys are, I mean, Chris and Nick are right. Well, you skew it one way, it's total pulp. If you just keep it where it's at, it's still pulp. But, we treat, well, we don't, but, critics treat science fiction and noir like they're dirty words, and
Yeah, I think it confuses people when there's plot. I think that when there's plot in something, it just confuses the hell out of editors and publicists, and they don't know what to do about it.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
I remember a couple years ago, at one point, they did, I forget, it was like the New York Review of Books or something like that, did this fun experiment where they took all these lines from Hemingway and all these lines from Mickey Spillane without attribution. No, and it was a quiz, and it was like, can you name which ones came from Hemingway and which ones came from Spillane? And some of them were like, you could not tell the difference because, like, for example, like the have and have not is probably like Hemingway's pulpiest book. It's got like a machine gun fight on a boat. It's got like
Right.
people's necks being snapped left and right and things like that. And I mean, it if you stripped off the Hemingway name, I mean, a lot of the things in there were people confused them with Spillane, but it was actually Hemingway. So I mean, yeah, I mean, this is all. I mean, it's. You know, I feel that somebody decides that they're the arbitrary judge and they go like, this is pulp or this is literature. But I mean, I'm not sure that's somebody slapping on labels. It doesn't always apply or ever apply. I don't know.
Well, the distance of history, I mean, Ray Bradbury seemed more, literary than he was sci-fi at the time.
Right.
Oh, did you say earlier when you were talking earlier, you said Bradbury, and who was the other old sci-fi guy?
Harlan Ellison.
Yeah, Ellison. That stuff is definitely pulpy, but with the time and distance, everything looks different. Is
Yeah, a
scene is
lot
different.
of Ellison's stuff was, I mean, that guy could creep you out on a nervous system level. He doesn't make your skin crawl, he makes your bones want to break in half. I mean, I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream is one of the best fucking things ever written in the English language. If you get to the end of that story and you don't get creeped out on some level,
Yeah.
I don't know what to tell you. It's just, he was an impeccable writer. He was amazing.
I think if Philip K. Dick too is
Absolutely.
sci-fi, it's definitely noir, definitely
Yeah. Yeah, certainly do Android's Dream of Electric Sheep, obviously what Blade Runner is based on.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, that book's a lot different than the movie.
It is. I put it in the same category as The Shining or
Yeah.
Fletch.
Yeah.
It's like you can enjoy the movie as one thing and you can enjoy the book as something else. Yeah.
In the book, the past is like confused. I mean, all these characters sit around being nostalgic about the past and like in
Right.
this dead, burned out San Francisco, and
Right.
like and buying these animals that are like that don't exist anymore. And so it's an incredibly sad book. I mean, I haven't read it in a long time, but it's incredibly sad as I recall.
Yeah, definitely.
So back to your own writing, what your characters, we talked about them having past and all that and how you write about it and iceberg stuff. What do your characters do with their regret? Do they, kind of Mickey Rourke in The Wrestler, try to redeem themselves and fail? Do they hide it and just kind of ignore it? How do you think your characters deal with things in the past that they don't like and wish they had done differently?
I think my characters, they reckon with it. That's
And
it. I mean, they have to like reckon with, I think they're usually like trying to outrun it, and in the end they can't, and they have to just look it in the face. I mean, some characters like, and this is a spoiler, but in Pickard County Atlas, like Pam, she doesn't need to like sit and look at what she regrets for the rest of her life, but does she regret everything in the, yeah, I mean, she still is carrying it around, yeah, I think, I don't know if any of my characters get redeemed ever. I think they just end up having to reckon with what they've done.
Yeah, my same same kind of answer that Chris just gave. Great answer, by the way, Chris. It's they have to kind of face the music on some level, but doesn't necessarily mean you know how to play the guitar. Yeah, usually when they try to overcome the past or try to address their regret, they end up obviously getting pulled down farther, or they just accept where they're at and they're just like, well, I guess we're gonna do like Towns Van Zandt said and wait around to die. So
I think I fall in that same bucket too. I mean, just because with crime fiction, I think that's just kind of the natural inclination is to bend that arc. And the manuscript I just finished, there's one character who I made a very conscious decision to actually have them like pull free in a certain way at the end. I mean, they don't pull free 100%. It's not like an absolute clean break, but I wanted a character who, I mean, because the traditional arc in Noir is obviously the descent of doom. Like you begin from a certain point, however low it is, and then you miraculously discover that there's even further to dig. But this one character, actually, I tried to kind of do a contrarian arc, and I think it worked. I mean, I'll tell you in about 3 drafts. I might end up reversing myself and killing him all over again, but we'll see.
Actually,
Um,
I retract what I said because I think in Pickard County, I tried to give every character a happy ending. That was the goal with that book. I know that seems messed up.
I didn't get that. Sorry. Did I misread?
A lot of people really don't. But like from where I was sitting, I was like, oh, everybody gets what they want.
Whether they like it or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they might be like, yeah, like laying in a yard, like just got hit by a truck, but I think they got what they want.
What are some of your favorite redemption stories?
Okay, I'm gonna go completely off noir here, but like I reread Invisible Man because I just reread it like once a month or something. It's just a book that I don't know what my problem is. I just keep rereading it over and over. And it's like what's so interesting to me about that book is the character doesn't need to be redeemed from anything, but the character somehow redeems the reader in the end, which to me is just amazing. Like because this character goes through all of this garbage, and that's sort of a Bildungsroman or whatever. I don't know how to say that word out loud. But it's like, it's like this trajectory of growth and like a coming of age story that gone horribly wrong, but like in the end, like we're left with the sense of like, you have to be able to hold all of these oppositions that aren't really oppositions. They're just different facets like in your head at one time. And to me, that's, I don't know. And so I always feel like there's redemption in that story. Well, and he's, coming out of the underground too, I guess, in the end. But yeah. Sorry. Feel like
That was a perfect answer. I love that book.
Oh.
The one character who always sticks with me is Jack Vincennes in the novel L.A. Confidential, not the Kevin Spacey character in the movie or the Kiefer Sutherland version in the pilot that never went out in the 90s or the Walter Goggins version in the pilot a couple of years back that never went. But anyway, in the book version of him, he's like a corrupt pill popping cop who's like one bad shaky day away from like just complete and total burnout. He does all sorts of horrible stuff. He frames people left and right. He does all these like miserable things throughout like the first 500 pages of a 700-page book, and then he redeems himself to a certain extent with as much as you can within Elroy's sort of morally compromised world. And then as soon as like he sort of emerges clean from this mess and he's been redeemed to a certain extent, he promptly gets shot in the face and dies. And for a long time, I've read that book however many times over the years. And for a long time, I was angry at that because it seemed so nonsensical to have this character sort of come through it all. And like, the page before he dies, he's like driving around, like he's like smiling, he has the window down and like, he's crying and smiling at the same time. And then boom, he's gone. But I guess as I got older, I mean, because I think I first read that book when I was 14, I sort of realized that Elroy's worlds don't allow characters to remain in sort of a static state of grace. Like there would be no ways if Jack Vincennes had lived as a character that he would sort of maintain what he had eventually inevitably in like the next book, like White Jazz or whatever, if he had lived. Now I'm creating completely hypothetical Elroy novels, but the character would have inevitably fallen again. So for him to get shot in the face is actually perfect. Like he has this redemptive arc. He comes out at the end and then he doesn't die perfect because he's done so much bad stuff over the course of the book, but he dies in a better place than you could reasonably expect for somebody who's a complete and total scumbag like that. And that's because of that, that's like the one character that's always really stuck with me for a really long time about that.
Well, yeah, that's the thing with redemption is like how long, okay, you redeem somebody, but then like, how do you sustain that?
Yeah.
They're gonna
And
get
books
up
end.
day and do something shitty. So like you can't, yeah, it's like an epiphany. It's like momentary and it's maybe life-changing, but it's like you can't sustain it.
Yeah. And books, because books and movies end, it's sort of a cheat. You leave these characters at this point, whereas real life doesn't work like that. And so, yeah, but yeah.
For me, I mean, a lot of the redemption stories were the ones that I mentioned earlier. Siddhartha, Bright Lights, Big City. Um, but and another one that we mentioned earlier was Blade Runner. Rick Deckard gets redeemed at the end. I mean, he gets saved by one of the replicants that he was sent to retire, and of course, Rutger Hauer gives that amazing "Tears in the Rain" speech. But in the end, and as Nick and Chris just said, when the movie stops, well, I mean, we're kind of left with Deckard's redemption, but we know through the course of the story that Rachel, the replicant that he's running away with, we know she's going to die within a year or two or 2 years or however long the 4-year lifespan I think replicants have. Sorry, I'm being a complete dork right now.
Oh, no.
But yeah, and of course, one more redemption story. If you've ever heard of this thing called Star Wars, there was a guy named Darth Vader. He got kind of redeemed by the third movie. So, I mean, that's kind of the first redemption story that I remember sticking with me. You think for 2.5 movies, you think, okay, this guy's got to go down. He's the baddest motherfucker in the universe. He's got to go. No, there was good in him. And that's, I know it's kind of a cheesy movie when you're looking at it from the eyes of an adult, but it is what it is, and it's a good story. So, the last good story that Star Wars ever did, I should say, but I won't go any further than that. You're welcome, Internet.
So do you think redemption is possible in noir, or is it a genre where if there's redemption, it's no longer in the genre?
I mean, I think Nick just pointed out a really good example of one
Right. Yeah.
where it's
Yeah.
like, there's your possible, there's your possible redemption story. That's how it ends,
So the character cannot live.
I mean, yeah, I mean, if you're going with noir, I mean, that's, like what Nick said, he gets in a good place, but better to die in a good place than in a gutter, I guess. It's like,
Look, in noir, a lot of it is sort of balancing out. It's not so much like redemption in like kind of a religious sense, so much just like balancing the equation. Like when you look at it, I mean, a lot of sort of classic noir involves a finale in which everybody's sort of equally eliminated and like kind of all the T's are crossed, the I's are dotted. Like, I mean, Jim Thompson was a particular specialist, I feel, in that. Like the killer inside me, like just like the everything is sort of bottomed out at the end. Everyone just gets wiped out. Like all this like mess and evilness and so on goes up with the house at the end when it burns. I feel like so there's like kind of a weird redemption in that sense. Like you have this rod and this rod sort of just eliminated itself. And I think there's lots of examples of that throughout the genre. Thompson's The Getaway, I think, is another good example of that, where I mean, they're not Steve McQueen and Ally McGraw, but the robbers in the book are, kind of morally expedient people, I guess you could call them. But anyway, like they think they're getting away with it, and they end up sort of taking themselves out of the equation in a certain way by going to El Rey and then like sort of being sealed off into what they very quickly realize is this hell. Yeah, I don't think it's redemption so much as like usually like the scales get balanced in a certain way in a lot of noir.
Yeah, I think it's like what you said, Nick. It's like, and Chris was talking about how, the redemption stops at this point. If you go on, if you carry the story longer, do they stay redeemed or not? And so, yeah. So maybe there's a time frame for redemption, but doesn't stay with them. No.
I mean, I think Little Underworld, there's like some redemption at the end, but it's also a comedy. So and is it sustained past the last page? No, it's of course not. Like everything that the characters have done is not undone at the end of the book, so it's limited.
Well, we're out of our questions and we're almost out of time. Does anyone else have any thoughts on the topic before we close out?
It's a
Well,
hard
it's a good
genre for
topic.
happy endings.
Yeah.
What's that? Say that again, Nick. I didn't hear.
I said it's a hard genre for happy endings.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And we'll end on that note. No happy endings. Yeah, but I mean, if you're watching this and read Rock in the Hard Place, we like to bend the rules. So, keep some of the rules, break some of them, whatever. But thank you all for joining us, and those of you that are watching live or watching this later when it's recorded, thank you for joining us and watching. If you enjoyed the conversation, we'll be hosting more on different topics. We'll post those on our Patreon page. They'll be available for people that are signed up for $5 a month and above. On a side note, if you're watching and saying, "Hey, I submitted to you guys and you haven't let me know yet," we're working on it. We're trying to get everything out and read for the end of the month. And then you can also email us at rockandhardplacesubmissions@gmail.com. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for your patience with our technical snafu. And I really appreciate those of you that hopped from YouTube to Facebook to continue watching. So that's great. Appreciate all of you. Yeah. Thank you. And support the writers here, going by all their work. Thank you.